What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Poetry and Prejudice. Today we are going to be reading The Mother by Gwendolyn Brooks, which is one of her most famous and widely anthologized poems. The topic of this poem is abortion, and the speaker of the poem takes a very interesting stance on the morality of abortion, which we are going to be discussing. But before we do that, I'm going to go through and read the poem as a whole, then I'm going to take it line by line, stanza by stanza, discuss the specific meaning of the lines, and take some time to point out the literary devices and connect those with the theme of the poem as I interpret it. With that said, let's crack into it. The Mother by Gwendolyn Brooks. Abortion will not let you forget. You remember the children you got that you did not get. The damp, small pulps with a little or with no hair. The singers and workers that never handled the air. You will never neglect or beat them, or silence, or buy with the sweet. You'll never wind up the sucking thumb, or scuttle off ghosts that come. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh. Return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. I have heard in the voices of the wind the voices of my dim, killed children. I have contracted. I have eased my dim dears at the breasts they would never suck. I have said, sweets, if I sinned, if I seized your luck and your lives from your unfinished reach, if I stole your births and your names, your straight baby tears and your games, your stilted or lovely loves, your tumults, your marriages, aches, and your deaths, if I poisoned the beginnings of your breaths. Believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Though why should I whine? Whine that the crime was other than mine. Since anyhow, you are dead. Or rather, or instead, you were never made. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. Oh, what shall I say? How is the truth to be said? You were born, you had body, you died. It is just that you never giggled or planned or cried. Believe me, I loved you all. Believe me, I knew you, though faintly, and I loved you all. So let's home in on the first stanza, which reads, abortions will not let you forget. You remember the children you got that you did not get. The damp, small pulps with a little or with no hair. The singers and workers that never handled the air. You will never neglect or beat them, or silence, or buy with the sweet. You will never wind up the sucking thumb, or scuttle off ghosts that come. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh. Return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. The poem begins, abortions will not let you forget. There's a couple things here. First and foremost, you can tell that the speaker of the poem, who is a mother, or rather at least conceives of herself as being a mother, and in a certain sense this is ironic because, of course, the topic of the poem is abortion. This woman has not had a child or has not had children. But it says abortions will not let you forget. So that tells us that the speaker is morally conflicted. Her conscience will not let her forget what horrible thing, in her interpretation, she has done. It continues on. You remember the children you got that you did not get. So this is paradoxical. In what sense can you get a child and not get a child? Well, this is, of course, referring to the fact that the mother was pregnant, but she did not give birth. So she had the child, but she did not have the child, if you will. It continues on. The damp, small pulps with a little or with no hair. So if I'm interpreting this as literally as possible, what I think is being referenced is just the way that a child appears immediately after it's being born, where it's damp and it's slightly bloody, it has little or no hair at all. A more perhaps sinister interpretation, and I can't avoid thinking about this anytime I read this poem, is taking that word pulp very literally. So when I think of pulp, I think, for example, of the flesh of an orange in the orange juice itself. And because the topic of the poem is abortion, what I imagine is being referenced is, of course, the pulp of a human body. Because, of course, with an abortion, when they suck the child out of the womb, it's broken up into little parts of flesh. So it's, again, a sinister interpretation. It's very difficult to think about. That might be what's being referenced here, or more literally, it might just be referencing the child actually being born. It continues on. The singers and workers that never handled the air. Of course, they never handled the air. They were never able to breathe. Why? Because they were aborted. And of course, because they did not reach any stage of maturation, they could not become singers, artists, or workers, laborers. It continues on. You will never neglect or beat them or silence or buy with a sweet. So you're going to see throughout this poem that there is a duality going on where there is the kind of sweet things that a mother would do for her child and also the potentially bad things a mother would do for her child. Now, the reason why I think there is this dichotomy throughout the poem is because one of the justifications that are usually offered for a woman getting an abortion is that she's going to be born, or the child rather, is going to be born into a bad environment, whether that be one that is, poverty, or because there's drug abuse in the family from the mother or the father, or because someone is abusive. So that's kind of being referenced here, right? You will never neglect or beat them. So that is a reason, I'm not going to say a good reason, but a reason that is offered often for women having an abortion. Well, this child is not going to be born into a situation where they're going to be harmed, where they're going to be neglected, they're not going to be paid any attention, or they're not going to be actually physically abused. Or silence or buy with a sweet, right? Silence if the child is crying too much or throwing a tantrum, something like that. Or buy with a sweet, right? Trying to bribe a child to stop doing something with candy. You will never wind up the sucking thumb or scuttle off ghosts that come. And here again, we see this dichotomy. You will never wind up the sucking thumb. What's being referenced to there? Well, I think what's being referenced is the act of a mother trying to take the thumb out of her child's mouth, right? So that the child does not develop a bad habit. Or scuttle off ghosts that come, right? Almost like you're shooing away ghosts, like a child who, for one reason or another, becomes scared. I imagine somebody, a child being in their bedroom at night and saying that they saw a ghost or a monster. And of course, in that instance, a mother or a father would have to come in and basically say, oh yeah, I took care of the monster. He's gone. I beat up the monster, or whatever have you, right? So that's the kind of thing that's occurring here. But you can see the dichotomy. In the previous sentence, we have the idea of a child being potentially neglected or physically abused. Here we have the speaker imagining a potential good thing, right? Breaking the child of a bad habit and also appeasing them when they are afraid. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh. Return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. You will never leave them, controlling your luscious sigh. So the idea here that's being communicated is, of course, well, you as a mother, because you don't have the child, you cannot actually leave the child. And what you are going to be missing out on in that experience is this, controlling your luscious sigh, right? A sweet sigh. Return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. So it's almost like, and I've heard mothers of newborns reference this before, it's almost like they can't get enough of seeing their child, right? They almost want to gobble their child up because they are so cute and lovable. And so this luscious sigh, luscious of course is like sweet, the luscious sigh and return for a snack of them with gobbling mother eye. You just can't get enough of seeing them and being around them, and you love them. But of course, if you have an abortion, you're not going to be able to have this positive experience with a child. All right, now let's home in on the second stanza. And I think I'm going to break this reading up into two parts because the second stanza is quite long. So it reads, I have heard in the voices of the wind the voices of my dim killed children. I have contracted. I have eased my dim dears at the breast they would never suck. I have said, sweets, if I sinned, if I seized your luck and your lives from your unfinished reach, if I stole your births and your names, your straight baby tears and your games, your stilted or lovely loves, your tumults, your marriages, aches, and your deaths, if I poisoned the beginning of your breasts, believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. So the first line reads, I have heard in the voices of the wind, the voices of my dim killed children. So what's going on here? A couple things. First off, notice the beautiful personification, the voices of the wind. And in the voices of the wind, the speaker has heard the voices of my dim killed children. So couple things. In what sense is she hearing their voices? Of course, this is something that's supposed to be like a ghost, right? It's the spirit of those who have been aborted and who have been perished that are, so to speak, haunting the speaker. The voices of my dim killed children. So why dim? Well, dim in the sense that they are faint. And this is actually referenced a little bit later at the end of the poem when she says she knew them, though faintly, right? So it's the idea that they are dim because, of course, they never reached full maturation, right? Just a little bit of light, if you will. It continues on. I have contracted. Now, I find this very interesting because, of course, when a woman is getting ready to have a child, she will contract. And I can't believe that Gwendolyn Brooks did not know what she was doing here by using that exact word. But I think what's more precisely being referenced, of course, is the act of contraction, almost like somebody would double over if they felt pain in their stomach, right? Contracted. So it's the gesture of feeling pain. I have contracted. I have eased my dim dears at the breasts they would never suck. Okay, so what's going on here? Again, the speaker is in her imagination, imagining that she's taking care of these children that she actually did not have. Communing, if you will, with their ghost in a strange, motherly way. I have said, sweets, if I sinned, if I seized your luck and your lives from your unfinished reach, if I stole your births and your names, your straight baby tears and your games, your stilted or lovely loves, your tumults, your marriages, aches, and your deaths, if I poisoned the beginnings of your breasts. So what's going on here? Here again, the speaker is imagining essentially all those things that the child could have become and could have experienced if they actually were able to be born, right? If they had actually had a finished reach as opposed to an unfinished reach, if they had made it into existence. If I stole your births and your names, I think that's pretty simple and straightforward. Of course, they were never born because they were aborted, and so as children, they were probably not named. As children who were not born, they were probably not named. Your straight baby tears and your games, the things children would do. Your stilted or your lovely loves, your tumults, your marriages, aches, and your deaths, right? Here again, the things that you go through as you are becoming an adult human being, right? Falling in love, having problems, facing adversity, eventually getting married if that's the route that that an adult would pursue. The aches, the pain, your deaths. In a certain sense, it's weird because it says your deaths. In what sense did the speaker steal their death? Well, because they didn't have a natural death, right? In a certain sense, they were, I was going to use the word murdered here, but I don't want to imply a moral connotation, but their life was intentionally ended before its natural conclusion. If I poisoned the beginnings of your breaths. So what is being referenced there? Well, once upon a time, if a woman was going to have an abortion, and this isn't, I don't think technically what we would call an abortion anymore, before modern invention, they would actually use like herbal concoctions to poison a woman so that she would have a natural, so to speak, miscarriage. I think that's what's being referenced. And this last line is very fascinating to me. And again, it shows this dichotomy for the speaker and why precisely she is conflicted. Believe that even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. What does that even mean? In my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Again, it's paradoxical or contradictory, much like you have children that you got that you did not get. So in what sense was the speaker being deliberate? Well, they consciously made the choice to have an abortion. But at the same time, even though they deliberately did that, they were not deliberate in the sense that they probably did not actually want to end the child's life. They had just justified it to themselves that they needed to do it because of whatever circumstances the mother found herself in. Once again, whether that had been poverty, an abusive family life, drug abuse, whatever the situation might be. So the deliberateness is that they consciously made the decision to have the abortion, but it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to end the child's life. It's just that they felt that the circumstances were not strong enough or good enough for a child to be brought into. Now let's home in on the latter half of the second stanza. The speaker says, "Though why should I whine? Whine that the crime was other than mine. Since anyhow, you are dead. Or rather, or instead, you were never made. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. Oh, what shall I say? How is the truth to be said? You were born, you had body, you died. It is just that you never giggled, or planned, or cried." Couple interesting things here. Though why should I whine? Whine that the crime was other than mine. So the speaker here is asking, well, why should I complain about the way that I feel about ending this child's life? There's no purpose. Why? Well, who's ultimately responsible for this decision? Well, it was the speaker, and that's referenced here. Whine that the crime was other than mine. So notice also the choice of words here. The speaker refers to the abortion as a crime. Why? Well, it probably wasn't a crime, legally speaking. They may have been legally allowed to have an abortion, but it was a crime in a moral sense. The speaker is acknowledging that she did something that was heinous, wrong, perhaps even, and I don't think this is a stretch considering the use of the word crime, murder. Whine that the crime was other than mine. In other words, the speaker cannot blame it on whatever specific set of circumstances she was in. Ultimately, despite the circumstances, she made the decision to end the child's life, and she can't put that on anything else other than her own conscience. Since anyhow, you are dead. So what does it matter? Whose fault it is? Ultimately, the result is the same, and the reason why that happened is because the mother made the choice to have an abortion. Or rather, or instead, you were never made. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. So what's going on there? But that too, I am afraid, is faulty. It's almost like the speaker is once again trying to rationalize the decision that she made to end this child's life by saying, well, I didn't kill you. It's not that you were even a human being. It's just that you were never actually made. And you will notice that this is an argument that people who are advocates, or at least think that abortion is morally acceptable, will often make. It's essentially her saying, well, that's not actually a human being. You can't kill a human being. That's just a clump of cells. And at least from the perspective of the speaker of this poem, that is not her understanding of the situation. But that too, I am afraid, is faulty, right? That kind of reasoning is not going to be helpful to help clean, so to speak, her conscience. Oh, what shall I say? How is the truth to be said? You were born, you had body, you died. What is missing? You were born, you existed, at least in the womb, you had a body, and you died. What is missing here? Well, a life. You did not have anything like an existence. And this is what is being referenced in the last line here. It is just that you never giggled or planned or cried, or in reality did anything else, because of course you did not have an existence. The last stanza reads, "Believe me, I loved you all. Believe me, I knew you, though faintly, and I loved you all." A couple things here. Notice the repetition. Believe me, believe me. Now, why is the speaker doing this? Well, very often people will repeat things if they feel like they are not believable. And I think the speaker of this poem feels like what she's saying is not believable. And we can contest it. She says, "Believe me, I loved you all." Well, this is very complex, of course, because if you had an abortion, if you intentionally killed your child in the womb, in what sense can you be said to actually love your child? It's a very difficult question. If I'm trying as best as possible to interpret this from the perspective of the speaker, I think what's being suggested is that the speaker loved her children out of some distorted motherly instinct. She was probably concerned about the environment that she was going to potentially bring this child into and the way that a child could be potentially harmed. And so she is loving the child by protecting the child from not being brought into this environment. But you can tell that that line of reasoning is not sufficient to dismiss all of the moral issues that she has with what she has done, right? I mean, this references back to why whine that the crime was other than mine. It's very clear that the speaker conceives what she has done as something that is criminal, if not legally, at least in a moral sense. But nonetheless, she's justified doing that by saying that she was acting out of this urge to protect her child from being put into a bad environment. "Believe me, I knew you, though faintly, and I loved you all." In what sense did the speaker know her children faintly? Well, because, of course, faint suggesting very lightly, because, of course, the child was not actually born. Though faintly, and I loved you all. I don't know if the speaker is actually believable here, but that is for you to interpret. In my personal interpretation, I don't think she can at one and the same time claim that she has intentionally ended the life of her child and also loved the child. That seems too paradoxical and nonsensical for me. So what is this poem communicating thematically speaking? Well, it goes without saying that abortion is extremely complex morally and spiritually. And we can tell that the speaker is very conflicted. And I think that this largely speaks to women's experience who do have an abortion. I've only known one person to have an abortion, and that was my grandmother, who I helped take care of until the day that she died. And we talked quite a bit about her having an abortion. And she was very much like this woman. The justification that she had offered for having the abortion is that the child was going to be born to a father who was abusive and alcoholic. And also at that particular time, they did not have money to raise the child. And so she had an abortion. And to the end of her life, she regretted that decision. And she felt just like this woman here, that this was a crime. It was not legally a crime. She got a legal abortion, my grandmother did, but it was morally a crime. She, my grandmother, conceived of herself as a murderer in a certain sense. And I think, once again, this kind of poem does just a tremendous job of pointing out the kind of contradictions in reasoning and also the contradictory emotions that a woman might have. Imagining what their child could have been, positively speaking, if they could have become a singer or a worker who handled the air, or of being born into a situation where perhaps they were neglected and beaten and became something like a criminal, a menace to society, if you will. These are all things that women probably have to take into consideration when they are having an abortion, and also ruminate about after they've had an abortion. And also the kind of contradictoriness of intention, right? Believe even in my deliberateness, I was not deliberate. Intentionally choosing to end a human life, but not doing it because you are acting out of some sort of homicidal impulse or something like that, but because you are trying to ironically protect the person protect the person whose life you are ending, right? I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. You guys tell me what you think about my interpretation of the poem down below. Do you agree with my interpretation? Disagree? Do you have insights? Did I overlook something? I like reading your guys' comments, so let me know, and I will see you in the next video.